Hey everybody, it's me, Erin and Elyse. Welcome to the first episode of what I am going to call Purple Chair Chats. Because it's me in a purple chair and I'm chatting. What I'm wanting to do with these episodes is basically just chat or talk about things that I want to talk about that I feel are important, or things that I'm going through as a new mama, and things that I want to remember, because I mean, these days are just a blur now. Like this first one that I'm making, I want to talk about the reason I had a planned C-section, and then what the actual C-section was like. I want to talk about this because Remy actually turns 3 months old tomorrow, and I can't believe it. Some of these details are already becoming fuzzy to me, and I don't like that. I want to remember when he was born and all what it was like, even if parts of it were not very pleasant, you know. For some reason, we didn't film anything at the hospital when he was born. We took pictures, but for some reason we never videoed anything. So I want to talk about the experience while it's still relatively fresh in my mind, because even when I was like kind of jotting some notes down to kind of keep me from rambling, there is stuff like I haven't even thought about it since it happened, and it's already becoming a little fuzzy. So let's just talk about this before I forget it. And hopefully if any of you out there are, you know, potentially going to have a planned C-section, or just want to know what it's like to have a C-section, hopefully this helps you and you can just hear about my experience. One of the things I did leading up to his birth was I watched other mamas talk about what it was like for them to have a C-section, and it was really helpful because you can read things about having a C-section, but I mean, I think it's way more informative to hear directly from the mouth of somebody that's actually had one. So here we go. The short answer as to why I had a planned C-section is because Remy was breech. He was breech for several weeks leading up to his birth. We never tried that thing where the doctors try to turn the baby. I think it's called an ECV, maybe I'm wrong. Just because he did have some potential health issues while I was still pregnant. My OB sent me to a perinatologist, who is a doctor who specializes in high-risk pregnancies or complicated pregnancies. My OB had never seen any complications. I think she just sends all her patients there, or maybe she sent me there because I'm 30 and apparently that's considered a geriatric pregnancy. I don't know. Anyways, I went to him, and we kind of ended up nicknaming him Chicken Little, because every time we went to him, he found some other problem with Remy where it was like, oh, his heart's working too hard, or he's too small for where he should be. And long story short, I saw this perinatologist like 3 times, and then was put on full bed rest by like week 32. And, you know, a full term full term I think is technically 36 weeks. I don't know. You can go like 40 weeks. So I was put on bed rest at 32 weeks, full bed rest. So I couldn't do anything except lay around, which was really hard because I'm somebody that likes to clean and straighten and organize and cook, and it just makes me happy doing that kind of stuff. It was also a really abrupt way to leave my job. I had no idea that this was going to happen. My job was really physical. I worked at the Getty Research Institute in Special Collections, which means not only did I help supervise the reading room where researchers and staff and scholars could come and consult and view special collection material, but I was also one of the people responsible for pulling special collections material that had been requested by all these people. So that included, you know, archives, manuscripts, rare books, prints, huge architectural drawings, all this stuff. So I'm up and down on ladders and pushing carts and all this kind of stuff. We're also responsible for reshelving all that. And if you've ever been, the Getty is a pretty large place. The Research Institute has 8 vaults, 7 of which are special collections materials. So that is a main reason I was put on bed rest, because it's like, well, you can't go back and climb up and down ladders, which I wasn't going to be doing anyways once I got real big. But anyways, so I ended up having to be home abruptly and didn't really get to say goodbye, even though it's not really goodbye. I mean, I'll still see him time to time. But so I ended up being on bed rest. Had to go into my doctor once a week for the remainder of my pregnancy. I also had to go in for non-stress tests twice a week, which is when they put 2 monitors on your belly. One tests for or monitors the baby's heart rate. The other one monitors if you have a contraction. Every non-stress test I had came back normal. Remy's heart rate was always great, but it's better safe than sorry. So, and it was getting to hear his heartbeat. It was always a lot of fun, even if it meant having to be strapped and onto a table for like an hour at a time. Have an itch twice a week. So did all that. He was still breech at 38 weeks. So they're like, we got to go on and schedule your C-section, just because they don't like you to go to 40 weeks because they don't want you to go into labor. So that's why you have a scheduled C-section at 39 weeks. We chose November 11th because the 12th is my niece's birthday. Hey, Lorelai. The 13th, we're not superstitious, but I don't know. I just didn't want the 13th. And then I was open to the 14th. Adam felt a little uncomfortable with that because he felt it was already, I mean, that was the Thursday of that week. So he already felt it was kind of too late, and he was just nervous about me going to labor. So we settled on November 11th, and the surgery was scheduled. I keep looking over here because Remy's over here in his chair. The C-section was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. November 11th, which means we had to arrive at 5:30 for pre-op. Adam and I checked in, and right after we checked in, they took us upstairs to labor and delivery and directly to pre-op, which was also the recovery room. The first thing I had to do was, oh, he's getting fussy. Remy! Hold on, fussy baby. Remy, I'm telling your story. Oi! I got a fussy boy. It's okay. Look at his little bald spot. He's rubbing off his hair. Okay, so, buddy roll. The first thing they had me do was completely undress and wipe myself down with these sanitizing cloth wipe things and put on my hospital gown and I think the hospital socks, the little greepy things on the feet. Once I was all sanitized and in my gown, I got into the hospital bed, and they asked me a series of questions just about like health and family's health, and I don't remember all of it just because, I mean, my nerves and adrenaline was so heightened about having surgery and having a baby. But basically they asked me a bunch of general health questions. Then I received my IV, which was the first IV I'd ever had, which I was really nervous even about that. So if you're nervous about an IV, don't feel bad. That's scary if you've never had one. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it definitely wasn't comfortable. After a while, you do end up forgetting that it's there. But anyways, I got my IV. We kind of just waited a little bit because the nurse shift like switches over, I think, at 6:30. At least at our hospital it did. So we waited for the nurses that were actually going to be there for the procedure, and then they got in and we chatted with them, and they just made sure we were comfortable and whatnot. I did request one final ultrasound just to make sure he was still breech, because if for some reason he had turned, my doctor told me that we would not go forward with the C-section. We just let, you know, natural birth happen, but he was still breech, so oh well. Rather see than wonder. But to get the epidural and everything, that didn't happen until I was actually in the operating room. After that ultrasound and all the doctors and whoever were ready, I was wheeled to the operating room by myself. Adam had to wait behind in the pre-op room. We get to the operating room and I climb onto the operating table. This is when I got my epidural. The epidural, I don't want to scare people, and it's not the same for everybody, but my personal experience, this was like the worst part of the whole C-section, was getting the epidural. I don't know if it's because this was like the height of my nerves and anxiety and just being scared. I've never been in the hospital for anything ever before. No major injury ever, no nothing. So this was like very scary, but you know, super exciting because you end up with a baby. So to get the epidural, they first tried to administer it by having me lay on my side with my knees pulled up and my back arched out like a cat. The anesthesiologist had a really tough time doing it that way. I don't even remember how many times he tried, and it was painful. The operating room was also freezing, and I think because of my nerves and the cold temperature, I started getting the shakes pretty bad. But the nurse I had was super sweet, and she kept reassuring me like, this is totally normal. The shaking is fine, and she kept trying to like comfort me and whatnot. After they could not successfully give me the epidural while laying on my back, they had me sit on the edge of the operating table with my legs hanging over and like lean forward and kind of have my head on the nurse's chest, and she just kind of rub my arms, and like that's how that is the position I was in when they finally were able to get the epidural inserted or whatever. It stings, but it's not that terrible. The worst part was when they had me laying on my side and trying to do it that way, and they just were not successful. So they quickly had me lay back down on my back because it immediately, like, you feel this flood of warmth all the way to your toes. Had me lay back. Granted, at this point, you are just like open, like there ain't nothing covering. I mean, my gown was still on, but nothing was covered. I mean, you're just laying there like for everyone to see. You gonna fuss? Once the epidural had been administered, that is when I got the catheter, which I didn't feel at all because of the epidural. They also scrubbed real hard where they were actually going to make the incision. I don't know what it was. I guess it's got to be some kind of heavy duty disinfectant. They put the little thing on my head, the, what do you call it? The net thing. Do you see yourself? They put the thing on my head. Did eventually cover up my business because they needed to bring Adam in, and I was like, I really don't want him to walk in and the first thing he see is me just like, I mean, I know he's my husband and he loves me no matter what, but it's still like, can we please keep some things normal? I don't know. Once they got me all situated, Adam was allowed to come in his scrubs, and he looked so cute, and he sat down by my head, and we had the curtain thing up, and then the doctors came in. They did like touch tests to make sure I couldn't feel anything, or I guess to see if I was numb, which I don't even know how to really explain it because they would like touch my leg, and I knew they were touching my leg, and I was like, hold up, I know you're touching my leg right now. And they're like, that's normal, you're gonna feel pressure or touch, you're just not gonna feel pain. I was like, okay. So everything got situated, and before I even knew it, the operation had started. Like, I wasn't even aware when they first started, so I guess that's a good thing. Adam, he didn't want to look, he didn't want to see, though he did comment to me later on that he looked over at one point, because they're like, my doctor is obviously the one doing the actual like incision and all that stuff down, but then there's a second doctor who apparently stands up on his stool and like pushes down, because even though I'm not able to push my baby out, somebody else has to. So this other doctor, it was like standing up, and Adam said with like all his weight was like pushing down, and that is when you feel what they describe as like, oh, you're gonna feel a little pressure and some tugging. So yeah, I felt the pressure at that point, and then bam, Remy was out, and he was taken over to be weighed, and we heard his first cry, and it made me cry. It was just, I just couldn't, like, it was just, I don't even know how to describe how I felt. Like, because you're on morphine and all this stuff, but you're still like in amazement of what's going on. And Adam got to go over and cut the cord and stuff, and then they brought Remy over to me real quick so I could see him, and like held him down by my face, and I got to kiss him and that kind of thing. But then they took him back to finish like checking his vitals and everything. And then around that time is when my chest started hurting so bad. It was incredibly difficult. At least I thought it was. I don't know. I mean, I was on morphine and whatnot, but it got really hard to breathe and my chest felt tight. I don't remember whose attention I got first, if it was Adam's or somebody else or the anesthesiologist, but I let them know that I was very uncomfortable, and they're like, it's fine, it's normal. When you're cut open like that, air comes in and gets like under your lungs or something, and that's what you're feeling, is that discomfort or whatever. So they gave me some sort of medicine and the oxygen mask, and that really helped. That happened, and then Adam and baby Remy went back to the recovery room with the nurses, and I was sewn up. I asked not to have staples. I don't know if that is an option for everybody, but I'd already talked it over with my OB and told her I did not want staples. I only wanted stitches. So I got put back together, and then they moved me, like kind of rolled me onto like a little wheelie bed and wheeled me to recovery. It was just so many emotions, and at this point, once the baby's out and all, I think you just kind of start to crash. Some women even like pass out at this point, but I never passed out or anything. In the recovery room, we tried to do skin to skin, like then put Remy on my chest to try to encourage breastfeeding, but my temperature had dropped so low that I was too cold for him to be put on me for very long. I mean, we did get a tiny moment of skin to skin. You just don't like your story? They piled all these blankets on top of me to try to warm me up, but then Remy was like right beside me with the nurse and Adam, and I guess they were continuing to do whatever check they do with a newborn. Basically let me and Adam know that Remy was having a little trouble breathing or like normalizing, because apparently for C-section babies, because they're not like pushed out like a normal birth, it doesn't like squeeze their lungs, or I guess there's like fluid in his lungs. I can't quite articulate it very well, but they said it was pretty normal. But they were waiting, and they did eventually decide he needed to go up to the NICU. So I barely got any time with him, and Adam went with him and the nurses. And then once they got me stabilized, they wheeled me down to what was my room for the rest of the week. I mean, it was crazy. Like, I would totally do it again. Postpartum was way harder. The immediate postpartum, the first month or so, which that's a whole other story in itself. That and my struggles with breastfeeding, and I actually ended up not breastfeeding, but again, that's a whole other story, and this video would be way even longer. So Remy stayed in the NICU a little more than a day and a half before he was brought down to us, and we stayed a total of 5 days at the hospital. We checked in first thing Monday morning and left late Friday afternoon. Also, I don't think I said, when he was born, he was 7 pounds, 18.5 inches. So he definitely was not super small like that perinatologist had worried about. I do think the bed rest that they put me on helped, because again, having a more physical job, I just think I wasn't gaining enough until I was on bed rest. He's happy. Normally, I say he's happy as he starts to cry. He's a healthy little boy. He's grumpy right now, but that's okay. We all get grumpy. But anyways, that's my story of my planned C-section. I hope it's not too rambly. I wanted to tell the story while it's still pretty fresh in my brain, and even if no one else cares about it, I can look back at this video and go down memory lane. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in to this first little episode of Purple Chair Chats, and let me know if there's anything else you want to hear about in another episode. Oh, he's fussy, we need to go. I also would love to share like what some of my favorite stuff has been, like products and stuff for him. Also, I'm planning on sharing an apartment tour, which basically I want to focus on how to make space for a baby in a small 1-bedroom apartment. Stay tuned. I have a lot of ideas. And thanks as always for watching. Bye. Blink, blink. Oh, time to go. Time to go.